Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Lower Central Gardens Trust Board. I'm just going to read out the housekeeping notice. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by the way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume completely down on your laptops. Thank you. So first agenda item today is the election of chairman. Is there any nominations for chairman?
I have no. I'd like to nominate Councillor Immaculate, please.
Is there a seconder to that? Lovely. Yeah. Councillor Gill, your chair.
So the second item on the agenda is the election of the vice chairman, and I would like to nominate Jamie Martin.
I second that, please.
Yes. So there's no other nominations. So Jamie is vice chair. So so next, I'd like to take any apologies for the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. We haven't received any apologies for this meeting.
And then I'd like to go on if there are any declarations of interest from members in respect of the agenda. I'm going to take that as no declarations of interest. So moving on to the next item is the confirmation of the minutes. Are there any issues with confirmation of the minutes? Yes.
I'll just say I noticed it wasn't noted about some sort of concession scheme for the ice rink in terms of maybe low income families or families within BCP, and that wasn't noted in the minutes.
I can add that into the minutes and then would they be approved other than that? Yeah.
There was one other item. Just cover it in the minutes. That Steve Bartlett sent across. He was asking for. I've just opened this up to members. He was asking for clarification on the revenue recognition. So this was the revenue which came in from the Winter Wonderland. So I say in respect of the minutes, it just it's nothing really in there. I think at the time we were saying that the bulk of the money came in, and then the only things which were actually spent out of the general fund were the electric, but the park itself, the Lower Gardens, actually retained some of the money. There was all a bit not particularly clear, but it was but essentially he did ask for clarification on that. I just wondered if anyone received. He did send an email to everyone. Did anybody have anything else to say on that?
He actually also mentions planting of seeds, grass seeds. You might want to expand on that because that was also discussed in the minutes, or not.
Don't have a recollection of the. He's brought that up separately, and actually I've gone back to him on that, and I have actually looked at the grass mix that was in there.
That is mentioned in the work programme for future dates, because I believe it's kind of missing.
Yeah. Is that okay?
As long as we cover it, yes.
So trying to make it as complicated as possible. Can you incorporate all that into the minutes, please?
Yeah, that
Perfect.
I'll put the additions in, send them around to the committee for approval, and then we'll go from there.
So now we're looking at the Lower Central Gardens Trust Board May report, and Kate, if you want to present this item, or whether you want to or not, it's your obligation, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. I will probably introduce it and then hand over to various colleagues when we get to relevant section, if that's okay with yourselves and members of the board. So I think the first item that we come on to is in relation to the delegation of authority, which the board at our last meeting agreed that they would take away to have a more detailed look around the draft document that was produced. So really opening it up to the board for comments on any clarifications, additions, thoughts welcomed in the hope that we can move this forward for adoption.
There's one thing that looking at the delegation. Is there in terms of the time limit on the delegation? Is this something which can be? It was saying about that you were delegating authority, but is this just for a single event, or I just want to make sure that we're not giving some sort of a continual.
This would be ongoing for operational day-to-day service decisions, unless the board chooses for it not to go that way, but that's the intention. So we haven't been able to find any previous formal scheme of officer delegations, so hence this document has been put forward. But historically, the items listed relate to day-to-day operational decisions that have previously been taken by officers rather than bringing them to the board on each occasion.
I'm going to suggest possibly proposing an amendment whereby we do it on an annual basis, so that just in case things start to go awry, and otherwise they'll say the decision of the 20th of May 24 covers everything going forward. If that's okay, yeah.
Good morning. Is there a danger that by only doing it annually, some important decisions are missed in the interim?
Any important fundamental proposal suggestion would still come back to the board, so it should be under these delegations. They're only the operational decisions that are laid out in this scheme of delegations. But if you wanted to add more clarification to that, we could. But any major change should come to the board.
Like everybody else, I'm a bit nervous about this. To what extent would the delegation take effect? I mean, for instance, would you decide to put an event on without consulting us?
No, if you look at it as detailed in the appendices, any events of I can't believe Amanda, does it we stipulate a certain size? I can't remember. Will come back to the board as laid out. And based on your experience on the board, Councillor Williams, I think hopefully you'd be able to add some context into sort of the historical operational decisions that officers have taken rather than bring them to the board in your previous role of chair. But it's your
historically it all worked. As long as we don't go beyond what we used to do, I'm happy to support it.
I don't believe we are looking to change what we've historically done, just formalise it so everyone is clear.
I mean, that was my understanding of the report. If I can just clarify, as far as I could see, any large events would be, you know, like an ice rink or something like that would come back to the board. If a bunch of students wanted to film in their gardens for an afternoon, that wouldn't be coming back to the board. The planting is kind of like the board, but maybe the mix of grass seed would be something which is kind of delegated. But if that's done something which is done annually, then we can go out and we can say, okay, well, you know, in terms of the grass seed, I think it was quite a lot, it's got a lot of trefoil and rye in the mix at the moment. But essentially that's something that, you know, could be looked at on an annual basis for long term. Is that, yeah, that's my understanding of it. Does that sound about right?
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you. Is that a nomination, Lawrence? Perfect. Jamie.
Thank you very much. It's really helpful. The second item and the third item that are within the report, I'll hand over to Amanda Barry, if that's okay, because they're led by the Commercial Operations Directorate. So the first item we have is the update on the concessions cashless payment accessibility item, which was raised by the board last time.
Thank you. So a query was raised at the last meeting in relation to cashless provision within the kiosks, primarily within the gardens. The facilities have recently moved within commercial operations, so still within the same directorate, but now within the seafront area rather than the leisure and events area where they previously were. And the provisions on site at the moment are for cashless within those sites. What we are very aware of is a successful motion that was taken to council asking for a review of cashless and cash only across BCP as a whole rather than just the gardens. And we will be working with colleagues in finance to assist them with that review. But that is the current position of those kiosks at the moment. But happy to take any questions or any feedback on that, which we can share with our colleagues as part of that review.
Thanks, Amanda. Do we have any information? Do the team actually record if they get people asking to pay by cash and not able to pay by other means? It's interesting to know sort of the level of interest from the public to actually pay only by that means.
Thank you. They don't formally record any request to pay by cash instead of card or apps. There are on occasions people who ask, do they accept cash? But we don't have any formal records of the numbers.
Sorry if I may, through you, Chair. I just wonder whether it's worth doing a short survey of that. It's not so much. I mean, quite often I'll say, you know, do you want me to pay cash or card? And I can do either. And many people would be in that camp. It is the people who will turn away and not make a transaction because they can't pay by cash. It would be just interesting to know, not necessarily in these, but some of our kiosks to try and inform the debate, because otherwise we may be worrying about something that's very small or significant, and we don't really know without data.
Just before we move over to Councillor Lawrence, just to let you know that live feed, the television bit has gone down. So, but they've still got our sound, so you can pull faces without the public knowing.
Thank you. I'm in my 70s. I don't have a problem paying cashless. I've got a mobile phone and I'm pretty au fait. However, a lot of my contemporaries, both slightly younger and a lot older, do have an issue. They don't know how to use cashless payments and they feel very uncomfortable not being able to pay cash. This isn't going to last forever because obviously nature takes its course and the older become deceased and the younger will be all switched on to cashless. I'd like to think that we could cater for people of an age that can't cope with cashless. We have an issue with car parks with the same problem. I would like to think in the parks, certainly the lower gardens, we could be a bit more understanding of people of an age. They use the gardens a lot. It's somewhere they visit. And I think I'd like the opportunity for them to use cash for a while longer yet, if possible. You couldn't bar somebody from using cash if you had cashless for older people. But if we could look at this over a longer term, perhaps, make allowance for pensioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely, I'll take both of those comments forward as part of the review, because, as you say, Councillor Williams, it's an issue or a concern across a number of areas that BCP manages and operates. So I'll make sure it's fed into the review.
Just drawing on that cashier issue again, I quite myself personally, I use cash for one specific reason. I spend an inordinate amount of money each week on coffee, and so I always take out £80 at the beginning of the week, and when that's gone, that's my my coffee budget gone. And going back to Andy Hadley's point, I actually find that I very quickly get used to the fact when Starbucks stopped taking cash in the in June of last year, I only went once and then I didn't go back. And currently going to your closest cash coffee to the gardens is the parlour. And actually people who use cash in that way, or whatever way they use it, do tend to get quite used to where they can go for cash. I'm not I can pay on my phone. It's just I just end up spending too much.
I want to say I'm a fan of cash as well, but and I often pay in smaller shops. But I really understand the older people, but it doesn't take away the problem that older people have in car parks. Because sometimes the machine will eat your cash, and then they don't have another pound coin. So, and I think most people do have a card. But I think what I find weird is that when you're offering someone, what I feel is a legitimate form of payment, and they say no. And this happened to me in a restaurant. They said no, and I had cash, and I said no, we're only taking cards, and I found that really weird the first time it happened. So yeah, maybe I like the idea of a little while longer, but I understand the difficulties because whoever is working on the kiosk will have to have a cash float. If they're taking cash, they need to be able to give change, and then and they're having cash on them with all the with the issues around safety and their personal safety. And so I get it is a very tricky situation, isn't it? But thank you, Matt.
Jamie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. What I was thinking when I brought this up last time was, yeah, essentially it's various groups in society who can't or don't want to use cash, and card, cashless systems. And it wasn't so much worrying about maybe people who don't want to as such, although that's important. It was maybe more about the people who can't. And just in this specific case, although of course there's the whole council looking into it, just from terms of the garden board and making sure that it's being done for the provision of open space and those facilities for enjoyment of the public. I was just thinking more maybe like as vulnerable communities who maybe have cash and then use that would go out and spend in the gardens. And it was just because on the last budget there was a line which had sort of been taken out with regards to managing the cash aspect of the concessions, and so obviously that had happened within that time frame, hadn't it, rather than something that had been done, because it was mention of there's been cashless for several years on the seafront, but didn't extend into the gardens, though, did it? Because there's still an allowance within the budget to manage those cash facilities. So it's just a case of the board being aware, saying, okay, there might be a more general policy across the conurbation, And obviously there's the motion now looking at that, but it was saying what is important in terms of the gardens, and as the trust saying, you know, how do we want it to be accessible to people? So that was sort of a distinction. I know there's a whole bigger argument about across the conurbation, but it's just about people who definitely, you know, need to use cash. That was the emphasis.
Yeah, I just don't want to prolong the debate. I think there's an important point there. You know, it's not free for us to deal with cash. The problems that Bernadette mentioned in terms of staff safety, but also just processing it, taking to the bank and dealing with cash has a cost. And it isn't just older people. There are some people who do it through choice. And you know, I guess that was part of why I was interested to know what the quantum is. At some point, we're going to have to say, I'm sorry, you know, that's the way it is. And it's at what point we get to that, because as you know, as you rightly say, Lawrence, there's a whole thing about at some point it's inevitable. And when we found in the COVID period, actually people were far more prepared to do that because they didn't want to receive something that might be contaminated in return. And so, you know, there was a change there where an awful lot more people got used to the idea of going cashless. And I just don't know when that point is, but we somehow need to tread that board carefully, don't we? Thank you.
So are we needing to accept the concessions part of the report, or is that separate, or is that included in there? We almost got ahead of ourselves by accepting the whole lot and then discussing something we'd already accepted.
Was that part of information of the report, or let's see.
Chair,
Yes.
can we accept it with the understanding that officers will look at the situation concerning cashless payment?
I think that's, yes, I think that's fair. And also in terms of cashless payment, can we say specifically towards the vulnerable groups? Because I think that was an important point that Jamie brought up there as well.
Oh, and you can wash money these days.
It's called launder it. It's called launder.
The next item is an update on activities and events within the gardens and a new proposal for the board to consider. Again, I'll hand over to Amanda Barry. Thank you.
Thank you. So from point 5 in the report, we've just identified some activities and events which will be taking place within the gardens area. As per the recommendations, these really are just for noting, and these align with the scheme of delegation around the events of a certain scale that we would normally bring to the board's attention. I'm happy to take any questions on those if you have any. The other item connected to that is a proposal that we have received in relation to a new event to take place in July and August within the Lower Gardens area, and this is a summer skate event. There's some information within the report that gives a bit of an overview of what's being proposed, but it aims to be an inclusive event which matches the Bournemouth Gardens heritage, and it would be a roller skate event, but also with a number of other activities such as movie nights and yoga mornings, and some skate sessions for local schools. The location for the activity is, if you recall where the ice rink was, it's actually being proposed to put it more to the east of that as you're looking towards the town centre area. And there's some information there in terms of the catering and the bar provision. But happy to take any questions, and we're looking for your views on that proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, open it up to the floor. And
thank you. My first question would be, what consideration has there been toward potential damage to the grassy areas there? I know that's a subject that reoccurs when it comes to events in the gardens, but has to be asked nonetheless, I think.
Thank you. The operator has submitted a protection plan, both in relation to trees, but also the grass area. So that would be taken forward with the parks team. There has been some initial conversations already, and part of the proposal for having it in a slightly different location to where the ice rink has previously gone is to provide some protection for the grass within that space.
Andy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm new to the board, and I just wonder, if we're going to do events in the summertime and the wintertime, for me, grass is a green desert. There are other habitats that are probably more interesting, but also it does animate the park, and it's a great thing in terms of the users of the park. It's lovely seeing people of all ages enjoying the skating in the summer and or in the winter to date, and now proposal for the summer. Is there an area where we should be looking to maybe not have grass, because we spend an awful lot of time and effort in trying to restore the grass between events? And if we're going to have summertime and wintertime events, should we be having an eventing area within the lower gardens? I throw that in there as a suggestion to the board, and it might be sacrosanct in terms of the history of the park, but in terms of the future of the park, it would save us doing an awful lot of reworking of the grassy area for it only to get covered up by another event not so long after that. I wonder if that's something the board might want to consider.
Been on the board quite a while, and I think one of the things that we're here to do is protect the heritage that's been there since 96. Certainly a long time. It seems to me that we're heading towards making it into the Tivoli Gardens of Bournemouth rather than the lower gardens, and I think there's a point in time where we've got to decide whether it's still a pleasure gardens or we're going to turn it into Tivoli Gardens. I personally think that people came to Bournemouth to enjoy the gardens and the sea, and it was part of the offer that people came to the area for. If we're going to change that, we ought to be honest with the public and ask them if that's what they want. Personally, I don't. I've lived here 45 years, and I've enjoyed the gardens in those 45 years, and my contemporaries have too, and the next generation after me have and do. And I think we've got to look at this in the light of it being a historic garden and not a pleasure garden. That's my tuppence worth.
I have reservations as well about turning the whole place into. I get the point about having a space, but then when you have an event on, as at Christmas time, the whole place is teeming with people, and those people who live in flats in the town centre and have no gardens and nowhere for their children to play, and just to relax and enjoy it, they're losing that space. I know it might seem a little bit, I get the commercial aspect, and I get that making money is really important. So, but I do feel a little, I'm with you on that one, Lawrence. I find it difficult to turn the whole place into a commercial, because it is lovely walking down there on a summer's day and people sitting on the grass and relaxing and enjoying themselves. And maybe maybe it isn't big enough for all these commercial events, because as I say, in the wintertime there are people everywhere and rubbish everywhere, and it does take away from the actual pleasure of the gardens as such.
Roger.
Thank you. What exactly is the commercial benefit of having a skate event? No. Are we talking hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds? Have we quantified exactly how much this will be worth, if anything, and who benefits?
Thank you. At the moment, the operator has submitted an event application proposal. So in terms of sort of a council fee, we're not at a stage to be able to say commercially what that would bring in. In terms of the wider benefits, the opportunity that's being presented, as well as yes, providing a commercial operation, it's helping support the ambitions of the town centre action plan, and therefore supporting the activity and regeneration within the town centre overall. And as we've seen with other events that take place in the gardens and the town centre, often people will come in and spend money in other areas of the town centre, as well as the particular event that is taking place. So unfortunately, I don't have any particular data or figures to provide to you, but from past experience, there is generally a wider economic benefit to these types of activity.
Yeah, just coming, I think, was just in terms of the in terms of the area, I do think that if we were to do anything other than have grass on there, if you go down to the area, it's got a huge drainage problem, and that's why, in a sense, it's quite hard to continue to renew the grass. And I appreciate the various different seed mixes which are being used down there. But I think, you know, if you put that down to hard standing, you'd have a lot more damage to the area. And I think actually, going back to the historical nature of it, actually, if you go back to the 1880s and you look at the old maps of the park at that end, there was a large fountain there, and it was paved, and they did actually remove that in the early sort of 19 over 100 years ago. So but I think actually we've improved on it by having the grass there and by making it an events area, so we don't have that staticity in a sense, but it is something, and people do sit on the grass and eat their McDonald's and hopefully put it in the bin burner but afterwards. But it is an area where people, and that is one of the purposes of the park. My one issue that I just feel is a little bit pressing on this is that we're talking about an event which ends on the 26th of August, which is kind of like the end of the growing season for grass. I think you'd struggle to reseed that before Winter Wonderland. That's my only concern. What we would do with that? What's in place of that?
Thank you. You'll know that I'm not anti-leisure and tourism because I was the portfolio holder for many years in Bournemouth. It's just the place. It's just the location. I mean, there are other central locations where this could happen. Horseshoe Common, for instance, even on the seafront. I just think this could be the one step too far with the lower gardens. I think we've got to draw a line somewhere, and this is it, in my opinion. Thanks.
Yeah, just sort of note the parallel between the discussion at the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee with regards to obviously trying to keep Poole Park as acknowledging that there's a residents in Poole Town Centre who want to use that park as their sort of outdoor space, and the same that's happening here, and like just through the whole of the school summer holidays, putting that event in. It does deprive, as you say, Bernadette, of a space for residents potentially, and that's where it sort of comes into paragraph 12 with regards to the ambitions of the Bournemouth Town Centre Partnership Group, which I'm not too sure what they are in any sort of detail. So it's just on the one hand, I think it's a really good thing, because I think there's, it offers something in a central space. It's just that if you're now taking potentially a key time of year out and just expanding that and creating a busier space there, I don't know if that still fits in with what the gardens are for, but then as well, it sort of does, because obviously it does bring in great events for people to enjoy. So and you know, free events as well, which is quite important in all that.
Just come in to say that I think at the moment, and Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, they are just proposing a 1-year trial at this stage. So this isn't a long-term commitment that we're asking the board to agree or not to. This would be a one-off event at this stage that we could learn quite a lot from potentially to then consider whether or not it's something that the board would want to support longer term, or if the actual provider would want to. So at this stage, just to clarify, it's just a 1 year.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. In relation to the queries about the grass, I'd have to leave it to my colleagues to comment on the timing for seeding. But because of their concerns about the ice rink location, that's why an alternative location has been suggested, which is to the right of where the ice rink would normally go. And the operator is very aware of the concerns over grass, and as part of their planning for the event have taken that into consideration. I believe, I don't know the finer technical details of it, but I believe the proposals of the sort of tent or marquee that they would be using would allow sort of light and airflow through to assist with the grass protection. But very aware of the grass issue linked to the ice rink, which is why working with colleagues in the parks team, an alternative location has been suggested for the trial.
I'm probably being really thick. What you're saying is to the east of the ice rink. So, but that's the ice rink kind of goes up to the stream bit. So that would be on what, on the other bank of the stream, or am I not knowing my north, south, east, and west?
But I would just say, if you remember back to where the kids club tent used to be, that's the area we're talking about, where the kids club tent used to be. So if you've got the ice rink site there, then you've got the cross path going through the gardens, the area towards the bandstand side. So you cross over the path from the ice rink.
Okay, that makes, for me, that makes a big difference, because obviously the kids tent was there every year, and normally with my kids in it during the summer. So I do know what you mean. So we're not covering the same area as the ice rink, and that area is actually got quite good herbaceous cover at the moment.
Thank you. I may not have my east, south, north correct either. But what we do have is an image of the location. If you'd like us to share that as part of the meeting, that might help give some clarity on the location.
Chair, while we're waiting, sorry, could I just take the opportunity to introduce my colleagues, which I should have done earlier because they've not been to the board before, but hopefully will be regular attendees going forward to hopefully help with some of the more parks related activities. So sat next to me here is Chris Wynn. He's our operations manager and actually oversees the Lower Central Gardens. So hopefully you might want to challenge him on a few of the questions that are going to come forward in a moment. And sat next to him is Mike Parkinson, who is our Parks and Open Spaces manager across the whole of BCP. Thank you.
While we're waiting, we may as well introduce the councillors to you, so that everything will fit in seamlessly. I'm Matt, councillor for
Andy Hadley, Poole Town, and I have the environment portfolio.
Jamie Martin, Bournemouth Central.
Lawrence Williams, Little Down and Iford.
Bernadette Nanovo, East Southbourne and Tufton.
Roger Boone, I'm a co-op team.
yes, Bernadette.
I have a question about this plan for the summer skate. Are we talking about this year? In the gardens?
Yes, yes, it would be this starting in July, going into August.
My understanding with applications to do anything in public with regard to BC, and probably the same for other councils, is that you have to plan the year before. So this is obviously very, very soon. And has it been in the pipeline for a while? Have they? It's been applied for some time.
The application into our events team has only been quite recent, but the operator has been working on plans for this type of event for some time, but hasn't come forward with it previously. So in terms of their event management process and all their proposals, they are very developed.
Thank you. Thank you for the image. That helps. In terms of a view, I'm struggling to have an impression of how big this is going to be, what kind of equipment is involved, how it's going to be, for want of a better word, placed on the ground, both the rink and anything associated with it. And there's part of my brain saying, great, you're not going to be affecting the area that already gets damaged by the ice rink. There's another little sneaky part of my brain going, well, if we've already got a bad piece of ground, just stick it on there again and forever it'll be a bad piece of ground.
Yeah.
But it's hard to be accurate in that assessment because I can't get a picture in my head of exactly the impact of the roller skating rink.
So I don't have the technical detail in front of me in terms of sort of weights or exact scale or size of the infrastructure and the technical elements. Those will be within the finer details of their application. But unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me at the moment. But what we do have is another image, which is sort of an artist's impression of what the proposal would look like. Just be aware this location is on the ice rink location, so they haven't provided an alternative view on the secondary location that's been identified. It would need adapting to fit the new space. As I say, this was very much to give an artist's view of what the offer could look like.
No, I think I'd be more inclined to support this on the other location. I appreciate what you're saying, Roger, about maybe it was a bad patch, but actually that patch is recovering. And with what we said last time about putting in better, or looking at alternatives and maybe foregoing for bowling green like aesthetic for a hardier grass that will, come back into will regenerate that area quicker. I think I'd be more inclined to, because obviously that's the bigger space, so that will still allow for a lot of people to come into the gardens and use that just for leisure purposes, while that can obviously go on that smaller space. So I think that's more palatable.
I have two questions really. Looking at that now, I'm wondering, is it possible, would this be able to operate on wet days? Because people are always saying they need something to do when they cannot go to the beach when they're on holiday in Beaumont. And my supplementary question is if businesses are keen on this, and I wondered this about the Christmas market as well, is how much business the actual shops get that are here all year round. Are they really keen on the Christmas market and these events going on in the park, or does it take business away from them in some respects? So two questions.
Thank you. In terms of the wet weather, so from the artist's impression, it is quite difficult to see, but the cover that is there would hopefully provide that ability for use during wet weather. But hopefully our summer is going to be lovely this year and that won't be an issue, fingers crossed. In terms of the wider impact on the town centre, for this event in particular, it is a trial event, and that would give us the ability to understand through the local bid in the town centre and the coastal bid to get some feedback to see what the impact and feedback from the shops has been. Certainly during the Christmas period and the Christmas Tree Wonderland, the bids have been supportive of that event because of the numbers of people it brings into the town centre. But this would be the first time we would have seen this sort of event in the garden, so we would need to understand the impact of it afterwards.
And I just wondered if you had looked at having it in the same site as the Winter Wonderland, as I say, if that grass is already in that, you don't like that idea. No, I'm just thinking, as it was suggested, if we have one bit of grass that's really not in good condition, then it seems pointless ruining another bit of grass. But
Lawrence, yes.
I just want to reiterate what I said earlier. We're here to protect the historic gardens, and if we're not going to do that, then we might just throw it over to the events team and say, help yourself, do what you want. This is just not in keeping with the historic gardens.
Just in terms of understanding that, so I mean, obviously, historically, on the site where they're going to put it, there used to be an events tent there every year, and events on that site, and they put a big tarpaulin out and pin it down, and that would be there generally from, well, for about 6 weeks over the summer. So it's not, yeah. So how does it differ from that? Just as a
Yeah, this is the gamekeeper or poacher turned gamekeeper, because I was responsible for that tent some years ago. However, I wasn't on the Lower Gardens Trust Board and didn't take that into account in those days. So I just maintain that our job on this board is to protect the historic gardens.
I was just going to go back to the point you were making about why that area. We did talk about the ice rink area, and we were just saying just at that point it's starting to look good again. The grass is just coming back through, and then to put something straight on it, and then it throws on another question, which is who's paying for the repairs to that area? Are the ice rink going to foot the bill when they say, well, hang on a minute, we didn't do that complete damage to that area. You've had another event on there. So we did talk about that, and that's why we looked at that other area further down. We did talk about some other areas as well, but that in the gardens, they're the two we've looked at really.
you are.
Yeah, I suppose you want to be careful not, because we could get into an all-day debate about our raison d'etre, but it's just to ensure the provision of open space and public building for the purpose of recreation and enjoyment of the public. So I'm just thinking in terms and considering there's going to be aspect of free events to this as well. I mean, it does sit within that as board members. I don't want to think if I agree to this, I've somehow betrayed the gardens, which would be because I don't see that as the case. If the board says to go forward with that, because obviously the majority of it is maintained for, everyone can still walk through there. There's still lots of space for people to enjoy, and just putting, okay, I know I could say occasional event, but if it turned into like 2 big events a year, but it's still there for for purpose of recreation and enjoyment of the public. And as long as we build into that, free events and discounted events and things like that, I don't see that as being contrary to what we're trying to achieve here, because over time, how people want to enjoy, spaces and their recreation time changes, and we're managing that within, the time we're living in.
Andy?
Thank you. I was going to make a similar point. I was reflecting on what Lawrence was saying about alternative venues, and within the town centre, we've got with the Winter Garden site. You know, if we had more time, there's something about is there a better site that we could think about imagining, enlivening for the benefit of this sort of event rather than the grassy area of the gardens. But I think, you know, we can't keep everything in Aspic on the basis of there's historical things that cease to happen or cease to continue to exist. So we have to think forwards, and I think as Jamie's just said, there is a real benefit to the public in having something off the beach in the nice part of the gardens to do on a rainy day when they're not in the swimsuit. So I think there's, you know, there is value to this in terms of in terms of that, and as you suggest, poacher turns gamekeeper, we have to try and think in the round of how we sustain the gardens going forwards as a place for people to take pleasure, which is its primary purpose.
I think also just building on from that, if you look at the, you know, in terms of the gardens, in terms of the grass, if the only objective of this committee was to say, okay, let's get the grass up and pristine, well, you could say, well, you go back 80 years and put little signs up saying nobody's allowed on the grass, and you can only perambulate along the path along the stream, and the grass would grow up a lot more quickly and would be you wouldn't get those little permissive paths that cut the corners and things like that. And in terms of the enjoyment of the park, there is an area that people will be able to sit down, you know, and there will be an area to skate.
I'm just wondering how the free events will work and how much, if the proposer has a business plan, how they're going to make their money if they're going to be giving free events to schools. And because the schools will be on a holiday, is that actually going to work? Or is this something that's been put in there to make it look good for those of us who want people? Yeah, that would be my concern. I like the idea of free events because I know how much everything costs, and families, you know, it's £16 for 4 ice creams. So you know, it would be, but I'd like to know how more about that. And if we do agree it for a year, I think we should all, for a trial period, we should all be down there checking out if it has lived up to its promises.
Thank you. So the operator, as part of their event planning, the majority of the events that will take place will be ticketed for capacity issues and making sure that that can be managed. But within that, they will be offering free elements to certain groups. I think in the report it talks about local schools and hospice charities. So at the moment, they will be working through that as a business as to how they will actually operate that. But just to be clear, it won't be free activity for all through this event.
So just to move this forward, I'm going to propose that we accept the recommendation of officers on this. Welcome if people want to put caveats on that and second that. We're very happy to discuss those. But I just feel just to move it forward, I want to propose it because I believe that it is within the context of the lower gardens. It does provide amenity, and it does provide, and there are site and grass protections within that, which do seem quite balanced in terms of the amount of amenity that this event will provide. And obviously, we need to do our scrutiny on the event over the summer. Although in my case, that will probably not involve skating on the. So, if I got a second for that at all, or somebody who wants to.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Could I just double check that that is based on the original location, so not the ice rink one, but the one that we showed on the map? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda was a request by the board to come back to consider the planting in the gardens. As the board has previously been advised, the council has moved to a perennial planting method across its parks and open spaces. This was done as part of the budget setting process in February 2023 and has been rolled out across all of our destination parks, including Lower Central Gardens. This aligns with the Council's climate and ecological emergency declaration and its commitment to move to more sustainable planting. We have previously looked and indeed the board challenged, but we cannot find any formal legacy council or even within BCP council planting policies. So as I say, this was previously taken as an operational decision within that. And if you look at the Bournemouth Borough Act 1985, it does state that the council may purchase or acquire botanical specimens and exhibits. So this is, again, aligns with the thought that this was an operational decision to do so. To add some further detail that many of the board members will be aware was that in December 23, a decision was taken to permanently cease the operation of the plant nursery at Kings Park, whilst seeking to secure alternative community uses for that site. Prior to the planting ceasing in February 23, the nursery site did provide subsidised plants to the Lower Central Gardens. Within the report, I've provided some early pictures from last summer following the change in planting. Since this time, the planting continues to establish itself and Chris's team have been working to ensure that that it's further enhanced as need be, and as they learn to work with the planting measurement that's been introduced there. Over the was it the autumn, Chris? Further bulb planting was undertaken, and there's a commitment to do further planting in spring 2025 in preparation for that. But it was really just to open it up, hence I brought my colleagues with me who may be able to answer some more questions around that. And if the board want to consider how they may like to see further planting, achieve further planting within the gardens, noting that as within my council revenue budget, I do not have the funding to be able to put further plants in there to then charge to the trust. Thank you.
Just before we come to Lawrence, there was just one quick clarification on the. You talk about the in the report. It's about 5,000 additional bulbs going in. Just the split of that, because there's quite a big difference between 5,000 crocuses and 5,000 daffodils in terms of the bulb. Do you have a rough idea of the split?
No, I haven't got the figures. Right.
No,
it was a mix. Just to be clear, it wasn't 5,000 of each.
No. 5,000 in
5,000
of everything. It said, yeah, that was clear, but I wasn't sure what was planted.
Sorry, Chair, my apologies, was to leave. We're on the meeting at 10 o'clock.
Thank you. The pictures are lovely, and you're to be congratulated. Thank you. I wonder if it's possible that the board could informally, during the summer, just go out with the team and have a look and see what you're doing, what you've done, and then we can, in the autumn, in the next meeting, we can then discuss it in more detail. I mean, on the face of it, it looks a lot better than I thought it would. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Be a pleasure.
Okay, so in terms of any more comments in terms of the planting. So yeah, I think, yeah, thank you ever so much for everything that's done. I went out a couple of days ago, and it's looking very nice, particularly in terms of the bedding. So are we happy to accept the planting as it stands? Is that fine? Propose it and Jamie seconds it. Are there any objections?
No, but just to give some reassurance that we'll continually monitor it and adapt as we learn, and as Chris' team really watch it flourish there. But yeah.
We've cleverly moved on to point 7, future meeting dates and the programme for meeting up. So have we got any? Do you want to come back to us with some potential dates for that?
Yes, absolutely, and potentially coincide it with the skate activity, so that you can see for yourself actually the impact it does or doesn't have on the gardens. So that if we come back with a future proposal, they would be best informed. Yeah, July, August time, assuming assuming the event does go ahead as now agreed. But yeah, we will look to get something and work with Sinead to get something in the diary ASAP for you on that one.
And that's upon next meeting, but we've got another future meeting probably coming up as well.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I was just going to give. Yeah, I was gonna just to give an update because you may be approached. The public toilets are regressively suffering from increasing amounts of antisocial behaviour. And my colleague Matthew Ridsep is working with the police, community safety teams, and the public conveniences contractors to look at what the options are there. It's very difficult because radar keys are very well used and circulated now, so potentially not the solution. But we do think we're going to need to look at some new technology to secure particularly the changing places facilities for genuine users, to avoid them being continually attracting the antisocial behaviour that we have. But there is active work in that area, so hopefully by the next board I can bring you back further information on that. But if any member of the public are finding them in to be a condition that they shouldn't otherwise be, then just report it through, and we've increased the cleansing visits there to monitor it. Graffiti removal, Chris's team are very active through the gardens at the moment in preparing them for summer influxes, and so I don't know where you are now, Chris, do you want to give an update?
We've pretty much gone through. There was a bit of a hold up because of budgets and mainly on buildings, to be honest, but now building maintenance budget's been unfrozen, so there's been a lot of graffiti cleaned off buildings, but we were painting over things on the bandstand, and it's that off-peak period when there's less people in the gardens and these things pop up, but they're looking a lot better now. So we've done lower, we're going into central now, and it's things like the old photo booth in Central Garden, things like that are getting sanded and stained. So.
And then moving on to litter bins, just to keep the board informed, if you walk down the gardens at the moment, you'll see a mix of compaction bins and the large 1100 litre bins that were there. The contract for the compactor bins has come to an end. They had mixed success, but are now in a very poor condition and need to be removed. The council is looking to bring forward a litter bin policy. Across the conurbation, we've got over 3,000 bins of various shapes, sizes and conditions, and so we're looking to produce a policy going forward that will standardise those types of bins. So for an interim period, and based on the success of the 1100 litre bins being provided within the gardens, which is really helping manage the capacity issues and enabling us to empty the bins more frequently through the general waste collection vehicles rather than the handballing that Chris's team team have historically had to do. The proposal is to remove the small number of compact bins that are still in the gardens and continue with the 1100 litre bins, and then we will review it throughout this summer to see whether we have caused ourselves an increased littering complaint. We don't believe we will, but we will actively monitor it and wait while we bring forward the wider council litter bin policy to see what that looks like for the gardens, with Ian's team in particular looking at subterranean bins as part of a future solution for some of our destination parks and our high streets. So that will form part of that policy. We hope to bring that forward potentially to Cabinet towards the end of this year. And as I say, we'll inform how that goes forward next year into the gardens.
So I've never been a fan of those massive big wheelie bins. They look so ugly. People are putting there's household waste in them everywhere, not just in the lower gardens, and nobody seems to be recycling anymore. There's no differentiation between a recycling bin or a waste bin. And they're so hard to, the really big ones are impossible to move. So if you wanted to move one to an area where, because people don't seem to want to walk on, 10 feet to an empty one, they'll leave all their stuff all around the full one. So the new bins, will they be any more attractive, or are they going to have any feature that will make people want to actually recycle? Yeah, that would be good.
The gardens doesn't currently have recycling opportunities within it, but that's definitely something we'll be looking at through the litter policy in terms of what can we do where we do have recycling, for example, along the seafront at key locations. It is always a difficult judgment on the contamination that we get in the recycling bins, because as you say, people will just go to their nearest bin, whichever it is, whether it's refuse or recycling. But that's definitely an ambition to have more on-street recycling across our open spaces. The 1100 litre bins, we will be working with planning colleagues to see if we can make them more attractive and house them potentially behind some wooden units, but that's an ongoing piece of work. We do agree they're not the most attractive bins, but they are functional. Yeah.
In other areas where you have
Ugly.
and then you have when you have loads of them, it's like bin city, and that's all you see. And I know we need to put to places to put the rubbish, but yeah.
We're not, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're not intending to increase the number of 1100 litre bins that you'll currently see in the gardens when you walk through, and you're looking to rehouse the bins by the BH.
At the moment, you've probably seen they come out of the gardens and get swapped for empty ones, and they sit by BH2, and it looks awful because there's just a big row of bins, and if you're sitting having a meal in BH2, you're looking at horrible bins. So one of the things we're thinking about is moving that round to Exeter into the little lane there, and actually building a little compound in that area where it's screened off. It'd be easier for our guys to wheel them there because it's on the flat, not going up a hill, which is also a bit of an issue for us at the moment. But with the gardens, as we're coming into the decent weather, they're about the only bins that can take that kind of capacity of waste. And that's what we found with the big bellies. We were hoping that the compacting aspect would answer this question. It just hasn't. And it's a huge problem. We were emptying them up to 5 times a day in the summer, and they still had problems. And we had to bring the Euros in to cope with that extra number. And they don't look nice. That's why I think with some kind of screening round them, it could be much nicer than it is at the moment.
Yeah, just with regards to graffiti removal and the agreement from utilities assets. So is that, have we just got permission from the utility companies to paint their cases?
It depends which bits. Some bits we will just do. If we see, for example, where the yellow buses ticket office is in Central Gardens, for example, there's a little substation there. When graffiti goes in that, we will just sand it and stain it. We won't ask them. We won't contact. It's just quicker, and it gets done. If we ask them, it can take quite a long time, depending on the company. So sometimes it's just quicker to do it rather than chase emails, let's say. Just on another point, we are talking with the probation service about introducing a scheme where they might be able to come in and do some of this aspect to help us along as well.
And tomorrow, is it tomorrow? No, Thursday, BCP are running a litter pick, come all kinds of cleaning in around the central gardens. So, and I've signed up for that. So if anyone wants to join me, that would be lovely.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a day of action. So all of those items were just for noting. Thank you.
Looking at the date for the next meeting.
We usually hold one before the January meeting, don't we? So the January meeting is for the accounts.
So-
in between that.
Yes, the next meeting date is on the 2nd of December. And then the 2nd of December. Yeah. And then we've got the one in January, which is on the 27th of January.
That's the informal walk around we'll do in August.
Yeah.
So we're all good to close the meeting. Is there anything else you need to come? No, all good. Yes.
Raise it in the meeting, maybe afterwards might be more suitable. I could have raised it in sort of matters arising from the minutes. It's just with regards to the art and makers market. I don't know if I was down there on Saturday speaking to the artists for a couple of hours. There seems there's been a few issues there, so I don't know if that's something the board can just speak with the officers about how that's being managed currently and going forward, because there just as people down there seems to have been a fair amount of, I know we had the email exchange whereby the T's and C's on the website were slightly different to what they expect them to be, but it seems that they're obviously accurate in terms of the reality, but there are other concerns there, how this current system is ongoing. So I don't know if that's something that I know the board has already said we've handed that over, but whether it's just like a conversation we have, or maybe we can sort with the artists themselves.
So just to clarify, is this something which is like an emergency that needs, because everything sort of, I was under the understanding that everything was sort of resolved a little bit for this year. Is this an emergency needs to be sorted now, or is this something which would fit nicely into December so that next year we do it better?
I suppose it would depend on the timeline of the tendering and how long this interim period is going to last.
Thank you. Happy to have a conversation. I know Helen's been in contact with you as well, and sort of some of the operational concerns that you've got, and we can make sure that we can move forward with that quickly. And then maybe the longer term review, we could bring an update to the next meeting.
Comfortable with that? You were nodding, so we're going to accept that. But yeah, obviously, any issues?
Different subject, cheekily not on the agenda, but whilst everyone's here, tell me to bring it up at the next meeting if you want to. A tourist tax. I understand that tax will help towards some of the things that we offer the public in Bournemouth, and therefore potentially the accounts for the trust. I don't know, hence I ask.
Thank you. So there is an accommodation bid board who are overseeing the accommodation bid. They will decide through the mechanism that they get set up what their income that's generated from that would support. So I'm not able to comment on exactly how that may impact the finances of the Lower Gardens Trust Board. It may be that by the next meeting there could be an update on that, because I know the ballot has only recently been completed.
In terms of bid, generally the people who pay into it tend to, or the people on the board tend to decide where it's going to be spent, and then the other people complain that they haven't been listened to, but that's how a bid generally works. That's my experience of it anyway. We're having a good after meeting. Well done.
Sorry, just one more thing, just to make sure we're legitimate, because the agenda, I meant to raise that at the beginning of the meeting and I completely forgot. The agenda 1 and 2 reference to the first meeting of the 24-25 municipal year. That'd be to 25-26.
Right, yeah, spend fun day.